Easter Island, as you can see from the map, is at the extreme eastern end of a triangular area in the Pacific which we call the Polynesian Triangle. Hawaii's at the northern angle, New Zealand at the southern angle, and central Polynesia, or core Polynesia, the part that was first settled, is the portion in the middle. Easter Island lies about 1,500 miles east of the central part of Polynesia, which was first settled, we believe, and it's about 2,000 miles west of South America. So it's one of the most isolated places in the world. In spite of that, Captain Cook in the 18th century visited all three of those angles, New Zealand, Easter Island, and Hawaii, where he met his death. Yes. The island is famous for its giant stone statues, some of them standing, as you see here, many of them fallen, and we don't know the circumstances under which they fell. But Father Sebastian Inglet, who lives in Easter Island now, reported that one of the great hurricanes of the, I think it was the 1960s, overthrew a number of statues. So it's not necessary to suppose that warfare overthrew the statues. They may have been overthrown by natural means, especially since the island is volcanic and subject to earthquake. The other thing which the island is famous are the engraved wooden tablets, of which you see a portion of one now. Rows of characters that appear alternately the right way up, as you see in that row, and upside down on the adjacent rows. Here's a photographic replica of one of the tablets known as Aruku Kinga. It's said to owe its name to the scribe who wrote it. It's not known when. But anybody can tell by looking at the two sides of it that there was not one scribe who wrote it. There must have been at least two. There are two quite different styles on either side. During most of the talk today, I'm going to be referring to this side and to this first row. We begin to read this slide on the left hand end, the bottom, and we read along that way, and then we turn the tablet over and read back along this way on the second row, and we turn it over again and read along this row, and so on. This kind of writing is called inverse boustropedon, and it's supposed to be peculiar to Easter Island. But the statement is not correct. Here, for example, is a letter written about 100 years ago by a Berber in North Africa, in the Berber script. You start on the bottom row, in this case reading from right to left, turn it over, go around the corner, and then come back along this row, and then turn it over again along there and along there. So the writing does occur in North Africa as well as in Easter Island. Some have said that the tablets cannot really carry messages, but are only designs, because they say it would not be possible always to find documents or inscriptions which exactly fill the whole area of a tablet. But that overlooks the fact that there are some objects, such as this one here, a pectoral, which have only a single row of characters. And it also overlooks the fact that there are inscriptions which totally fill the available area, such as this famous one from Egypt, the Rosetta Stone. Sir Peter Buck has pointed out that Easter Island tablets are engraved on both sides and sometimes even over the edges. And he says that indicates it can't be writing, it's just a design. Well, here is a tablet. It happens to be the Ten Commandments. It was found in Ohio, believed to be about 2,000 years old, written in an old Hebrew script. And you'll notice the writings everywhere, down the sides, at the ends, and front. Not a scrap of space is wasted. Scribes simply did not waste space. They adjusted the length of their writing to fit the space available. In this case, the Ten Commandments were shortened so as to fit them into that space. Here is an Egyptian example where every available space between the carvings of the people commemorated is occupied by statements in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. And here is an old Sumerian tablet from about 2500 BC, where virtually every space is occupied in this dedication to the god Inanna, goddess Inanna. This is the same tablet that you saw me holding, a photograph of the original, not as clear a one as the one I was holding. About the year 1860, and during the 1860s, a Belgian priest, Bishop Joussin, who lived in Tahiti, visited Easter Island and became acquainted with an Easter Islander called Metoro, who was one of those who had returned from slavery in Peru. The history of Easter Island, as you probably know, is a disastrous one in which Peruvian slavers carried off nearly all the people. Later they were returned as a result of representations made by the French and the British, but they came back almost devoid of their original culture. But one of them, Metoro, claimed to be able to read the tablets, and with the bishop's aid, the information he had was put down on paper. Here are portions of a dictionary that the bishop constructed with Metoro's information. Classifies these signs on the tablets. In this case, these are verbs, and the word marama, to see, and so on. Symbolic characters, that which is good, actions again down there. Compound characters where more than one character appears at the same time. He who is king on the left-hand side. Terrestrial animals, a whole catalogue of those, lizards, rat at the top, a dead lizard, and millipede. Various kinds of fishes. Ika is the general word for fish in general. This is a whale, a baleen whale, and a sperm whale down here. Small invertebrates, marine animals there. Men, different kinds of men and the roles they fulfill. On the right hand side, the heavens, a sign for the sky itself, which is that curious sort of Viking helmet with the one or two horns on it. The sun represented by that 6th grade sign that you see in the middle on the right hand side. And various things like building construction material. These are supposed to be the rafters that hold up the roof of an Easter Island dwelling, tonga, they're called. G in this script stands for NG, and when you see slides that I have composed myself, I prefer to write them the New Zealand way, which is NG if you mean NG. Fruits and flowers on the left-hand side here. Next slide. Metoro and Bishop Joussin are not our only source of information, though they are our main source of information about the alleged meaning of the slides. Tor Heyerdahl, when he was exploring Easter Island, met a person whom he calls the village captain, he doesn't name him, who was in possession of a manuscript that had been written by his father in Peru, recording the signs which are not shown clearly in focus here. They proved to be selections from the same list that Metoro gave, so there's nothing new actually in that information, but it's a different document. Most important of the researches done up till now are those of Professor Thomas Bartel in Germany. He has, with tremendous labour and efficiency and skill, transferred all the inscriptions on every known example, and there are only about a score known altogether now, transferred them to paper as you see here, and published them in a form accessible to those of us who are endeavouring to decipher them. With the aid of Metoro's information, we can combine Bartel's work with Bishop Joson. Metoro sang or chanted the sounds of all the letters on 4 of the largest tablets. That's about 120 years ago that was done. And Bishop Joson wrote down what he believed he heard Metoro saying. Professor Bartel, in modern times, has discovered the manuscript containing this record of the sound values of the tablets and has published them. And with the aid of those 2 documents, I have assembled here the statements that Metoro made, the sound values Metoro made under each of the signs that he assigned those sound values to for each of the tablets. This is just line 1 of the tablet I was showing you in my hand a little while ago. There is a portion of the beginning of that same line enlarged more, and here is a sign which Metoro said meant these heavens or sky. But you'll notice he doesn't just say rangi, which means sky. He says katuhi terangi, rising up in the sky. These 2 signs, he said, meant land. Both of them, he said. They both have the same meaning as land. But he doesn't just say land, land. That's henua, henua. He doesn't say that. He says kita henua erua, which is strange, bad grammar. It says to the land singular, the 2 of them, which is very peculiar. Then he gives the name of the king, who is reputed by tradition to have been the founder of the Easter Island settlements, Hotumatua, and it says by Hotumatua, and so on. I won't linger with that at this stage, but the point I want to make is that Metoro was choosing, apparently, what he considered to be the appropriate prepositions or other small particle words to join these single signs together into a narrative. Next. Let's look at some other examples of how he did that. Here are 4 cases of a sign that he said meant bird, manu. Manu is bird. If it has its wings out, then it's a manurere, a flying bird. And he gives different formations here. This one he says, the red bird, Kimanu Kura, the red bird has flown. And different meanings are given for each of these same signs. So why is he doing that? Under what authority is he inserting these extra meanings for the single signs? We have to try to solve that to find out whether his translation is genuine or not. Here's another example, the symbol for the sky, or the god of the sky. This is the one we saw first of all, rises up in the sky, travels into the sky, has become happy in the sky, and at the very edge of the sky. It's the 4th one. And yet it's the same sign each time. Next. Now we start to get some idea of what's going on. We have the same sign here, 2 different examples. This one he calls tongatu, meaning erected house studs. The other one he says kitatonga. Get the word tonga each time. But when you have tonga in that phrase, it means to the south, or to the south wind. Tonga has at least 2 meanings in Polynesian. Now Egyptian hieroglyphs do that. They will use one sign to stand for more than one meaning if the sound permits it. When they have the same sound as these do, tonga and tonga, we call them isophones. And if they have the same shape, we call them isomorphs. These conform to both of those categories. They're isomorphs and isophones. We find that in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Here we have 2 pairs of signs. This one says has dwelt, has begun to dwell. This one says it's established. Over here we have rain and has risen. So we have 2 different meanings for the same sign in each case. This one has these two meanings, that sign has those two meanings. Next slide. Here we have cases where they sound the same, but have been assigned a different meaning. This one, they look the same, they sound the same, but have been given a different meaning. The land of Matuta, and the other one, the land he came forth hither. When Captain Cook visited Easter Island, he found that the senior chieftains and other important people were wearing a circular headdress with feathers arranged around the edge. They called it a hulk or a hanu. Here we have a row of hieroglyphs, all the same, obviously based on that cat pattern that we saw just now. Mitoro said it was the sign for Hull, which was, we know, was the name of that kind of elaborate cat. But it's being used here in different senses. Hull can mean to blow, it can mean wind, scent, as well as hat and other meanings. And these are examples of phrases where it's being used in various meanings. Here's an interesting one. We have two sets of isomorphs here, things of the same sound, things of the same shape, pardon me, isomorphs. One set over here, another set on the right. This six-rayed hieroglyph on the left can, according to Mitoro, sometimes have the meaning of star, Eku, or the sun, Ra, or fire, Ahi. So we have their isomorphs, which are heterophones, different sounds, same form. On the right-hand side, we have two others, Niho, a tusk, which it obviously is, but it can also represent Noho, meaning to dwell or to live. So we have isomorphs of the same sound, almost the same sound. Instead of saying isophones, identical sound, they're similar sounds, homophones. Now we're beginning to get a hint of what Mitoro might be doing. Maybe he's using these things which sound something like something that you can't draw to indicate the thing you can't draw. Now it's hard to draw the word dwell. How do you, what's of a drawing do you make for dwell or live? But it's easy to draw a tusk. A tusk, which is called Niho, could be understood as meaning Noho if the surrounding phrases make that meaning sensible. Perhaps he's using things that sound similar to one another to have quite different meanings. Next slide. That's done in Egyptian, by the way. Now let's have a look. Some people have said that it's not writing at all, as you heard me say earlier on. Let's see what might be the situation in some of the other islands of the Pacific. Easter Island, as I stated, is in a very remote part of the eastern Pacific. Micronesia, on the other hand, the Caroline Islands in particular, lies in the northwestern part of the Pacific, not far away from Asia. Micronesia, as is well known, at least that portion we call the Caroline Islands, as is well known, has a writing system, and it's still used today. The natives are quite familiar with it and will point to the signs and tell you what sound values they have. This sign, they say, is pronounced as ne. But in the Easter Island system, according to Mitoro, sign which is very, very similar, means coconut, and the Easter Island word, the Polynesian word for coconut, is niu. Sounds strangely like the sound used in Micronesia for that symbol, where the word for coconut is quite different. There is a fruit in Easter Island called the poporo. It's symbolized by a picture of a fruit hanging down as it does on its stem. But in Micronesia, where that fruit doesn't grow, the same sign, and also the sign upside down, is called po, which is the first syllable of the Easter Island letter. sugar cane in Easter Island, written like that. The letter tor, not meaning sugar cane, but a sound value, tor, is written like that. And so on, as you can see, as we pass down these different lines, it appears that the Micronesians are using slightly stylized versions of the Easter Island symbols to convey the same sound, or a similar sound to what they have in Easter Island, but not the same meaning, because the language is different. We can continue that with other examples, as you see here. Now here's a curious sound, a curious sign. I don't know its explanation, but according to Metoro, it means the sea, which is called Tai. In other words, the sea in Polynesian is Tai. Now, what is quite similar to that has the sound Tai in Micronesian, whatever that may mean. Two arms crossed, written with a word that begins with Re, and the same sign has the sound of Re in Micronesia. So it appears that there has been a connection between the writing system of Micronesia, which nobody disputes, and the similar hieroglyphic system of Polynesia. And furthermore, the sound values which the Easter Islanders attach to their signs have been accepted by the Micronesians, even though the signs don't correspond to what they would call them in their language. A coconut tree is not called by that name in Micronesia. Let's look in another direction now, the other angle, the southern angle of a Polynesian triangle, New Zealand. In 1840, something like about 700 chieftains all over the islands of New Zealand signed a detailed treaty with Queen Victoria's representatives known as the Treaty of Waitangi. In some districts, all the chiefs signed with a cross, like people did at the same period in North America. Even as late as 1840, I believe most of the women in North America signed their wills with crosses, and their lawyers wrote beside the cross what the name of the person represented. In some districts, as the Wellington district, a kind of a horizontal stroke with some scribbles up and down were used by all the chiefs. Each of them adopted basically the same sign. In another district, Kapiti Island, which is in the Wellington area, most elaborate symbols were used by the individual chiefs. These give me the impression of being intelligent men who may have had some education prior to the arrival of the white man in the matter of writing. This symbol used by Tirani Hayata, for example, a very important chief in the Wellington area who lived in Kapiti Island, it looks like a beginning of a cat's cradle, and his name incorporates a particle of the word which means cat's cradle, or a kind of cat's cradle. It looks as if he's seizing on something similar to his name and using it to illustrate his name. Here's an interesting one, a man whose name, chieftain whose name was apparently Pomure. Not Pomure, a very famous chieftain's name, but Pomure. Mure is the name that the Maoris give to the larva of the tiger beetle, genus Cicindela. He's drawn what is essentially a picture of a tiger beetle larva. There's the tiger beetle larva, there's his signature. The second part of his name, Mure, means tiger beetle larva. I would say this is a clear case of a person in the historic period using a Polynesian system of writing. Now, it's only a couple of years since a very splendid program came to American television from New Zealand under the name Te Maori, and the very first statement made on that program, to my intense disgust, was made by a Maori saying the Maoris had no writing system. Rubbish. Look here now what that man's ancestors were doing in New Zealand. Sometime during the Middle Ages, these cave inscriptions were made in the South Island of New Zealand. These are, as you can see, large sea fish, for the most part sharks. The generalized term for large marine animals such as sharks and whales and other large animals, in the Maori language is taniwha. These are taniwha. In the middle of them, unexplained, stand 4 men. The word for men is tane. The word for 4 is fa. They have written tane fa, men 4, telling you what the picture's about. Could there be a clearer demonstration that writing was known in New Zealand and existed there in ancient times? I don't think so. It's a very clear example. So let's come back to what Metoro was telling us before, this time a little more willing to believe that he may really have been recording writing. And here is his vocalization of the first sound on line 1 of Aruku Kurenga. Next slide. What he wrote is bewildering. Bishop Jason himself attempted to translate that very section you've been looking at. May heaven rain upon the 2 lands of Hotu Matupa, so that the king may be seated at the base of heaven. It is the land and his eldest son on the land, that the canoe may sail towards his younger brother, and that he may reach the child who flies up to him in the sky, etc. He wrote a whole lot more, but it's so silly I didn't bother to copy it. Another translator, thinking that Bishop Jason had not got it quite right, had a go at the same passage. This time he says there's somebody called Ikarangi. And Ikarangi gave lands to the number of 2. Remember, it had the illiteracy, the land 2 of. Ikarangi gave lands to the number of 2 to Hotu Matua. He was installed at the side of Tirangi on the lands, the 2 of them, as king of the country. From his country, the canoe continues towards his native land in order to reach his son. Now, all the tablets give these kinds of totally inconsequential and stupid, ridiculous translations, if we use Matoro's readings. And because of that, many people have said, no scribes with the intelligence and artistic skill to be able to produce tablets such as we have would dream of wasting their time on writing such rubbish. Therefore, Metoro must have made it all up. When he saw a fish, he just said to a fish, and when he saw a man, he said by a man or to a man or whatever it occurred to him to say. He wasn't really reading it at all, he was just making it up. Now, my wife and I both had similar histories as young people. My wife and her brother were brought up among Maoris in the remote northeastern part of New Zealand. They attended a Maori school where they were the only 2 European or Pakeha children. In the Wellington area, I had the good fortune to be a member of a family which was very close friends with a distinguished Maori family from the South Island, whose members gave me a lot of their time and told me about their traditions. That's these people, this part of this family tree. I show the tree because it illustrates the extraordinary memorizing faculties of Polynesians to be able to trace their ancestors right back to this period when the canoes came to New Zealand in 1350, and then they go further back to that, to ancestors who lived in the homeland before they left their homeland. These are people, some of these are still living today. The son of this guy here lives in Massachusetts. From our contacts with these skilled Maori families who were aware of the traditions, as children we became acquainted with things that most New Zealanders never get to know. Here is Peter Buck, or Te Rangi Hiroa, reminiscing about his childhood when he says, we used to learn karakia. Karakia are spells that you say if you want something to happen. He says, this is the karakia I was taught as a child to stop rain. And it goes, erere te kotare, ki runga te te kuparapara, ruru ai parirau, ke nato au klau te hua, which translates as, "Fly, O kingfisher, onto the bunch of astelia," that's a plant that grows attached to the trunks of trees, on the bunch of astelia, "and there shake your wings, lest your young become wet by the rain. Cease the rain." And he says, I never understood what a kingfisher had to do with stopping the rain, but that was the charm we used to say. Years later, I became interested in the problem of why we have these nonsense rhymes in both New Zealand, apparently, as well as in Easter Island, if we are to believe Metoro. Could I have the light now? How's it going? I'd like to read something now. If you tell me when you're ready, please. Here is something which was published in the Royal Society of New Zealand's Transactions in 1890 by very learned authorities on the Maori language, including Archdeacon Monsell and Sir George Grey. It's their attempt to translate an important traditional poem in Maori history relating to a great Maori treasure called Korotangi. That's a jade carving of a dove that the Maoris are believed to have brought with them from their ancient homeland when they came to New Zealand. The dove is now in the National Museum in Wellington, and this is a portion of the poem as translated by Archbishop Monsell. "Great is the love to my bird, it moves in me in the evening. Into the house enters my liver, heedlessly. A day I wait. Tomorrow, this day, when will it lift its foot? Where is Korotangi, the dove? It has been missing," and so on. Here is another poem published in the same volume in 1890, the Royal Society of New Zealand. "Great is the love to my babe that glows within in the evening. I enter the house myself alone. Look, girl, at the duck that swims there. It is naught. It's a Maori duck. We must look at the feathers," and so on. One says, how can intelligent people have made up such nonsense? Archbishop Monsell himself, although he had the temerity to give this translation, says, "A very intelligent Maori to whom I submitted the second song gave it up in despair. He questioned whether it had been written down correctly." So you see, Easter Island has no prerogative, no sole prerogative to nonsense rhymes. Very important, serious Polynesians in New Zealand made them too. I couldn't believe that people with the intelligence of my Maori friends who wrote poetry and taught us Maori songs when we were in school, that they would write or even tolerate such writings. There must be more to it than that. Looking at that little poem, that little verse, which was the charm that Peter Buck said he recited as a child to stop the rain. The first line, which says "Erere te kotare," talking about the kingfisher flying. Suppose instead of, we read reri, suppose we read reri. Instead of a he, instead of ete, ata, and instead of kotare, which is the word for kingfisher, the verb kotare sounds almost the same. Erere ata kotare, you wouldn't know what it was, what really is different. And suppose we maintained that transformation all the way down through the verse, this is what we're going to end up with. A little poem which means storm clouds, stormy weather, obey, turn about, go away, be calm, veer off in another direction. Now that's a sensible charm, isn't it? Maybe you don't believe in charms, but that certainly is what you should be saying. It appears that in Maori magic, you must not let the thing that you are trying to influence know directly what you're trying to say. You have to conceal your statements in the strange way in which you saw. That's the end of the Kingfisher poem. Now, in finding these solutions, I was not merely using the standard Maori dictionary by Bishop Williams. I was drawing upon other sources of verbal information, in particular a book written by Frank Stimson as a result of his researches in the Tuamotu archipelago around about 1940, and thereafter he remained there. He made the astonishing discovery at that late date in history. World War II had already begun. He made the astonishing discovery that the people of the Tuamotu Islands actually speak a language almost identical with that of the Maori in New Zealand, a dialect of Polynesian which is almost identical. Obviously they're closely related to the Maori, although they live in nuclear Polynesia a long way away. The very important thing he discovered was that 5,000 words occur in the Tuamotu language that have been lost from the Maori language. There are words to do with sex, enormous number of words dealing with sex, and a large number of words dealing with the gods and mythology, various pagan themes. Apparently, these are words which bishops dislike and don't record when they're recording the vocabularies of people. Bishop Williams left them all out in New Zealand, and we just lost them. We didn't ever know they had existed. What happened in the Tuamotus was that there was only one bishop, and there were about 30-odd islands. It was impossible for the bishop to send a pastor to each one of the islands. They just had to travel from island to island, and the result was the so-called bad words were not eliminated from the languages of those Tuamotu islands. And it's our treasure to have these words preserved, given back to us, and which now enable us to translate passages in these strange karakia that we otherwise couldn't have translated. Here's one which Sir George Gray, he was a great Maori scholar back in the 1840s to 1860 period, one which he recorded long before it was even known that the Easter Islanders had any tablets or any theories that they had a writing system. This one is quite extraordinary. Upoko, upoko, fiti te rā, head, the sun shines. Hei kai no, te kutu o tota upoko, you may eat the lice of my head. A disgusting statement. Upoko, upoko, fiti te rā, head, the sun shines. Why should such a ridiculous poem have the effect of causing the sun to shine? Nobody could tell. Next slide. I tried my Kingfisher recipe on it again. Instead of upoko, let's read epokoi, and then hita tara. Hita is old Maori. Haka ai mi au, taki tu, taki ai pokoi. Epokoi, hita tara. It now becomes, O cloud, let the sun come out. This I conjure by gesture and by chanting the spell. O cloud, let the sun come out. I believe here we have the solution to the Easter Island problem. Let's go back to where we were before. We're taking now just the first three characters. Remember we complained about the foolish use of a singular article, the in the singular, to indicate two hieroglyphs, both standing for land, henua, the land dirt, it is two. This is one of the things that bothered the translators. They didn't know how to deal with that. Let's try a Kingfisher transform on that. Instead of katu itirangi, we make it katu hiti airangi. Instead of Kite henua erua, to the land it is two, make it kite hunua arua. Hunua and henua are the only change we've made. We've made a homophone come in here. And then the last line can remain the same, no hotu matupa. It now means, Hiti Airangi is the ancient name of Easter Island. It now means Easter Island was discovered by Hotu Matupa on his catamaran. Hunua erua is a word meaning canoe double. Next slide. Let's go on and do some more of the same line. Next slide. Remember these strange translations that the Belgian and French clergymen obtained? So illogical. I won't read it to you again because you've seen it before. I'm just reminding you of it. And the other alternative one, how silly it was. Now let's see what happens when we try the transform to it. We're going to take Metoro's dictation just as he gave it and transform it into similar words which make sense. Next slide please. We'll keep going. Now translate what we've done. Itiarangi, that's Easter Island, was discovered by Hultu Matula on his double canoe. It is located at the extreme limit of the sky. The land he found to be of small extent. To this land he steered his double vessel, constructed of two separate hulls, clamped tightly together, namely the Oteki and the Oya. This is a tradition which we already know from Easter Island. And when I struck that passage, I said to myself, we have the solution. We're getting a sensible translation. We have a recipe which can be imparted to other people, and other people can do it. And that fits in with what we know of the traditions of the island. Now, the reference was made in that passage to a double canoe. I recently had the pleasure of hearing Professor Bartel lecture on the state to which he had taken his researches, and he showed a number of signs for which he thought the meaning might be as indicated in his diagram. This was one of the signs he pointed to, and he said he thought it might mean double canoe, and he'd written in German beside it Doppelboot. He didn't know what word it might be in Polynesian, but he thought it was double canoe. Well, on the tablet we're talking about, Aruku Kurenga, that sign does occur once on the other side of the tablet, in one line, and here is a case where it occurs. We look at it in the context. Here it is drawn out as a hieroglyph, and these are the sound values that Metoro gave them. And we find that the sign for a double canoe does not correspond to a word for a double canoe. Is it that disappointing? Well, no, not entirely. Because if we continue reading, we find that the passage does in fact deal with the double canoe. Here is the version as given by Metoro. Here is my suggested transform. And coming up now is the translation of that transform. But hope with, I don't know what it was that had happened, but apparently they're giving up hope. The double canoe is the word keeping steadily on a straight course, keeled over. Now the double canoe sign occurs in the word for with it, but the reference to the canoe occurs immediately afterwards. Keeping on a straight course, keeled over on account of a large rock, and the captain of the vessel died. However, they continued on without swerving, passing the headland until their home village came into view. Some incident that happened early in the history of Easter Island, apparently. So, well, here's what one single line comprises. You can see it's quite a lot of information. Line 1 of the same tablet we've been talking about all along. Let's carry on with translating that line. Now here's the bit we've already done. Hiti Arangi, that's Easter Island, was discovered by Hultu Matula on his double canoe. It's located at the extreme limit of the sky. The land he found to be of small extent. To this land he steered his double vessel, constructed of two separate hulls, clamped tightly together, namely the Oteki and the Owa. The double canoe continued on a direct course until he, Hultu, cut the lashings of the outrigger, whereupon the two vessels separated, each rushing pell-mell ahead, hither. He, Hultu, was the first to reach land, and he was exultant. As for the other vessel, it made a loop around the island, after which those people who were on board her came back into view and returned here to settle down in peace. Thus our founding father, Hotu, assumed the office of kingship. There also arrived here a chieftain of high rank, so designated by the king, namely his own son, whereupon there were rejoicings. In the sky overhead there appeared a bird in flight, poised above the land. Good was that omen. Now the settlers began to search for edible materials on the island. The men started to build coops for the chickens that they had brought with them and to transfer the chickens ashore. Boundary lines were determined and root crops were planted with the aid of the cold digging sticks, so far as suitable places could be discovered. And here it was, the king included, they made their settlements. But they continued nonetheless to sail about here and there, always searching for good localities, and at these they would plant root crops. Green unripe fruits were also discovered on the island, and so they continued to explore. But exploration, I'm passing into line 2 now, but exploration could proceed effectively only insofar as the winds remained moderate, for, sorry, the misprint, whenever the wind blew from the south, the sea became very rough. So Manukura, that's to say Red Bird, the title of the chief counsellor, so Manukura would never sail towards dark, gloomy cloud banks with violent and extended winds, for one could be driven ashore and wrecked by the wind when it veered to the south. Despite arguments that arose, these travels were brought to a successful conclusion. And so the people learned how to make use of calm days and to seek protection by taking shelter in unexposed places here and to withdraw them from exposure to the coldness of the wind, and so on. So here we are back looking at our tablets again, this time with a new sensation, our realization that they really are documents and that they will perhaps tell us something about the so far totally mysterious history of the great stone statues of Easter Island. Thank you.